Hey guys, welcome back to the Civil War Wanderer. Happy Cinco de Mayo. As I was making my coffee today, I started kind of realizing that I was not familiar with the historical context of Cinco de Mayo. I do know that it is the celebration of the victory of the Mexicans over the French army at the Battle of Puebla. But beyond that, I wasn't too familiar. I am not Mexican. I'm from El Salvador, so I'm not too familiar with Mexican history, but I decided to dig a little deeper and just kind of see what that was about. As I started reading up on it, I saw the year that this battle took place was 1862. And that perked up my ears because 1862, we have Fredericksburg and Antietam, we're kind of in the midst of our Civil War. And I wanted to see if there was any sort of connection between the American Civil War and this war that Mexico is now a part of, which is called the Second Franco-Mexican War. In Spanish, it's called La Segunda Intervención Francesa en Mexico. So to set up the picture, Mexico had just gotten out of a 3-year civil war and was very financially in debt. It was in debt with the UK, Spain, and France. So the person in charge of Mexico at the time, his name was Benito Juarez, he tells these nations, hey, Mexico for 2 years is going to stall payments of that debt that they have. The UK and Spain make some sort of agreement with Mexico, and that's that. But France has a very different response. France at this time is under the control of Napoleon III. And Napoleon III sees this as an opportunity with the United States involved in their war and with Mexico falling back on their debt payments as a good time to reestablish a French presence within the Americas. His goal is going to be to take over Mexico and place an emperor and then create those trade lines with the Confederate States of America for their cotton, which at this point in Europe is very scarce. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So in January of 1862, I believe, the French army gets to Mexico, starts pushing inland. Fast forward to May, which is where we now are with the Battle of Puebla. So the region of Mexico that takes place in is Puebla de los Angeles, that translates something roughly to like Village of the Angels. And here, a ragtag army of volunteers and some militiamen under General Ignacio Zaragoza will defeat the well-trained army of Charles de Lorenzes. I apologize for the mispronunciation of the French name. I am terrible with French names. If you've seen any of my lives that I do with Sweet Tea and History, I am terrible at French names. Anyways, so they defeat the French army, and they're sent back to kind of lick their wounds, I believe in Veracruz, which is a port city. And so this kind of pushes that timetable about a year. In 1863, they come back and the French will come back and they'll be successful to take that area. But at this point in 1863, and this is kind of where we get into the American connection, 1863 in the United States, you have the Battle of Vicksburg starting to happen. You have Gettysburg down the line. You have these kind of signal points in these battles that signify that the Confederates are kind of on the downward slope of their achievements, So eventually in 1864, Napoleon does, place a French emperor by the name of Archduke Ferdinand Maximiliano of Austria. But by this point, the war in the United States is so obvious that it's kind of, it's going to be a Union victory, that France doesn't really get the chance to create those trade routes that they want to get the cotton and send arms to the Confederate States. So nothing really becomes of that. I do want to say Lincoln was a strong supporter of Benito Juarez, who was, fighting against the French. And but he couldn't really do much because of that fear that France would, see this as a act of aggression towards them, and so in exchange, start helping out the Confederate States of America a lot more and give them a lot of support. So Lincoln and the administration kind of have their hands tied. After the war, 1865, Lincoln and then after his successor really lean on the Monroe Doctrine to push out to make it very clear that the United States does not want a French presence in the Americas. In 1866, the French army will go back to Europe because of the Monroe Doctrine, but also because they are also at risk of another war on their borders over there. Maximiliano actually gets left behind. He will be executed in 1867. Um, Kind of going back to when news spread of the victory of the Mexicans in La Batalla de Puebla in California, there was a lot of Mexican people and that were very pro-union, and they had immediately seen that connection of what that meant, this victory meant for like the not being able the French not being able to support the Confederates. So they're very happy. They're celebrating out in the streets. They have the parade. But they actually create these things called juntas patrióticas, which is, I guess, that would translate to patriotic groups. And what they do is they will actually they will raise money every month to support the war effort, both of them, both the Union war effort and the war effort down in Mexico to keep the French at bay, which I just thought was really neat. So yeah, that's kind of the connection between Cinco de Mayo and our Civil War. So I hope you learned something today. I know I sure did, but Feliz Cinco de Mayo, and